There were wars you've heard about, battles you've seen in documentaries, and generals whose names fill old textbooks. But there were also commanders whose armies never marched in daylight, whose soldiers had no banners, and whose victories never appeared in official history. These were the generals who ran shadow armies, hidden forces that influenced borders, toppled kingdoms, and shaped the ancient world without ever being formally recognized. And what most people don't realize is that some of the greatest victories in history weren't won by legions on the battlefield, but by these invisible networks, operating far beyond ordinary military records. Before we go deeper, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let's see how far this community stretches across the world. And while you're here, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to learn has been buried under centuries of silence. When you support this content, it helps bring these hidden stories back into the light. Stories that powerful empires preferred to erase. Most people believe ancient warfare was straightforward: 2 armies, a battlefield, and a clear winner. But the truth is far more complex, far more strategic, and far more psychological. Beneath every famous commander, Hannibal, Alexander, Cyrus, Caesar, stood others who didn't crave glory or public recognition. They operated in coded networks that modern historians barely understand. Their missions were so well hidden that even kings sometimes didn't know their names. These were the ones who quietly altered diplomacy, sabotaged enemies before armies arrived, recruited informants deep behind enemy lines, manipulated supply routes, intercepted communications made of clay tablets and knotted cords, and destabilized rival generals before war even began. These people weren't spies, they were military architects of deception. And the fascinating part, while kings ruled nations, these shadow generals ruled information. They understood a truth that is still relevant today. If you can control what your enemy knows, you can control the outcome of any war before the first sword is drawn. Their armies were not made of thousands of soldiers. They were made of infiltrators, scouts, counterfeiters, decoy units, rogue tribes, double agents, and even manipulated merchants who unknowingly carried coded messages embedded in trade transactions. Their power was routed not in size, but in silence. To understand them, we must step back into a world before modern intelligence agencies even existed, a world where information traveled slowly, but deception traveled fast. In that era, every empire, Egyptians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Chinese, Mayans, depended on information networks. But only a few created structures so advanced that they resembled modern special operations or psychological warfare units. These units were small, secretive, and highly specialized. They didn't just report intel, they shaped it, twisted it, weaponized it. They manipulated emotions, fears, and political rivalries. They created illusions where none existed. In many ways, they were the first ones to understand what modern governments call perception control. And one of the earliest known masterminds of these systems operated long before Rome or Persia gained dominance. His name is almost forgotten, yet echoes survive in scattered inscriptions and military fragments. He served under an empire that controlled land by engineering fear more effectively than armies. The Assyrians, this unnamed commander, referenced only as the King's Hawk, built what may be the earliest version of a shadow army. His strategy was simple, but revolutionary. If the enemy believes they are surrounded, they will lose before a weapon is raised. He placed small, elite units disguised as traders and pilgrims along enemy border towns. Their job wasn't fighting. It was spreading targeted rumors designed to fracture alliances. They whispered about betrayals, false treaties, and phantom invasions. They manipulated local chieftains into suspecting each other. They bribed astrologers to declare unfavorable omens. They created paranoia so thick that enemy states exhausted themselves preparing for wars with each other instead of confronting Assyria. The Assyrian king never praised these operations publicly, because acknowledging them would expose the empire's greatest weapon, psychological destabilization. But while that was impressive, it was only the beginning. The next shadow general on record comes from Persia, a man whose tactical brilliance has been misattributed to kings for centuries. Persian expansion didn't rely solely on military might, it relied on perfect timing. And perfect timing requires perfect intelligence. This general, whose identity was erased after his death, designed a courier network so fast and efficient that messages could travel 2,500 kilometers across the empire in days, not weeks. But his real innovation wasn't the speed, it was the deception built into it. Every messenger who carried a military dispatch also carried a second set of instructions. Psychological reports. These included the mood of border communities, the loyalty of regional officials, the patterns of foreign traders passing through checkpoints, and even public opinion in enemy territories. Using this data, he created predictive assessments of enemy behavior. Centuries before modern military intelligence began doing the same. When Persia conquered cities without resistance, it wasn't because the enemy surrendered icily. It was because the shadow general had already hollowed their will. Still, the most infamous of all shadow generals emerged during the Greek world's most unstable era. The time between the Persian Wars and the rise of Alexander. While historians celebrate the generals who won public battles, they forget the one who never appeared on any victory list. He served multiple city-states in secret, not because of treachery, but because he believed that real power lay in manipulating chaos, not controlling land. He had no official rank. He moved between Athens, Sparta, and Corinth, exchanging classified reports behind closed doors, playing each city-state's pride against the other. His operations included bribing Spartans to delay reinforcements, leaking altered blueprints of Athenian ships to Persian spies, and inciting rival factions inside Thebes to sabotage their own commanders. His name was Themistocles, not the public Themistocles recorded in history books, but the secret one whose letters reveal an entirely different man, a psychological war strategist who believed that the mind was the true battlefield. But nothing compares to the shadow general who shaped the ancient world most profoundly, the Roman strategist who engineered a method still used by modern intelligence agencies. Unlike other generals, he didn't rely on fear, rumor, or prediction alone. He built a system that ran like a silent machine, the world's first integrated military intelligence apparatus. And here's the shocking part. Almost none of it was credited to him. He operated under Julius Caesar, but Caesar never publicly named him. Likely because acknowledging him would reveal how much of Rome's genius was manufactured by invisible groundwork. This commander monitored tribal movements before Caesar entered Gaul, mapped all water sources along enemy routes, bribed barbarian scouts to report false distances, and arranged for decoy units to appear stronger than they were. He controlled the shadows of the battlefield. His armies never appeared in formation. They appeared in whispers, delivering misinformation to rivals, delaying enemy alliances, or convincing tribes that Rome was too powerful to resist. He understood what few strategists of his time grasped. You don't defeat an army, you dismantle its confidence. Caesar won battles that historians credit to bold leadership, but the truth is uncomfortable for many. Caesar's victories were engineered before he stepped onto the battlefield. These shadow generals didn't just influence war, they influenced how nations thought. Their methods shaped political negotiations, family alliances, trade patterns, and even religious movements. They manipulated human psychology long before psychology existed as a field. They knew how to weaponize uncertainty, how to create illusions of strength, how to make enemies doubt their own supporters. Their armies were invisible, but their impact was enormous. They were the silent puppeteers who tilted history's axis. And now, as we prepare to explore the first of the 5 legendary shadow generals in detail, you're about to see how these men altered the world using tactics no war movie or schoolbook ever mentions. Their strategies still appear today in intelligence agencies, propaganda units, and diplomatic negotiations. But remember, this is only the first part. If you think ancient history is predictable, wait until you see how deep these networks went, how advanced their methods truly were, and how much of world history was decided by individuals who never appeared on any throne or monument. They say history remembers the victors, but the truth is that history only remembers the ones allowed to be seen. The real architects, the shadow generals whose armies operated beneath the surface, remain buried in footnotes, erased in royal tombs, or disguised as advisors, whose true missions were never written down. And now, as we enter deeper into these top 5 ancient commanders who shaped wars through invisible networks, you will see how every empire that seemed unbeatable had an unseen hand behind its victories. These men built military systems that functioned like brains, not bodies, collecting information, predicting reactions, and applying pressure in places where swords couldn't reach. What you're about to hear isn't just about strategy. It's about the psychology of control, the anatomy of deception, and the intelligence operations that determined whether civilizations rose or fell. The first shadow general who deserves recognition is the Assyrian mastermind known only through indirect references, the king Eshok. While emperors like Ashurbanipal or Tiglath-Pileser III took credit for vast expansions, the hawk was the one who weaponized fear, creating what might be the earliest system of pre-battle destabilization. He didn't send armies first, he sent messengers, infiltrators, and planted rumors that traveled faster than troops. Before Assyria even approached a region, rival chiefs were already fighting each other in panic. It wasn't military conquest, it was psychological fracture. The hawk understood a hard truth. No army can defend a nation that is busy defending itself from itself. Modern analysts would call this information-led warfare. He invented it thousands of years ago, and yet his name appears nowhere in the royal annals, because the kings claimed all victories. But the few surviving clay tablets describing the silent hawk whose words fly farther than arrows tell us he was real, and he was feared. The second in our list comes from Persia, a strategist erased purposely by Persian kings to maintain the illusion of royal omniscience. He wasn't a battlefield commander. He was the architect of Persia's intelligence and courier system. Most people admire the royal road for its engineering, but its true purpose was far more sinister. It gave Persia near real-time information on every border and every rival. He organized a system where nothing is hidden, as Herodotus wrote. But what Herodotus didn't understand was how that system was used to manipulate enemies. This general deliberately leaked false troop numbers to Greek informants, sent coded diplomatic messages meant to be intercepted, and coordinated border spy rings who reported not just military activity, but local sentiments, tribal grudges, and economic tensions. He built psychological profiles of leaders long before the term existed. And when Persia conquered resistant regions without fighting, it wasn't mercy, it was orchestration. His brilliance was never credited because the kings preferred to be seen as all-knowing. He designed the system, they took the applause. The third figure is the one who blurred the line between loyalty, betrayal, and brilliance, the Greek strategist who quietly engineered divisions between city-states for decades. Unlike the others, he didn't serve one nation. He served the idea of balance. He understood that if one city-state became too powerful, all Greek politics would collapse. So he became a ghost, moving between regions, leaking select information to each side, offering insights disguised as friendly advice that led to delays, fractures, or redirection of military resources. While generals prepared for visible war, he executed invisible ones. Some of his letters reference coded instructions written in simple sentences that appear innocent, yet contained layers of implied meaning, understood only by close allies. He manipulated morale, convinced leaders to suspect their own allies, and made sure no army marched with full confidence. Many historians think the Greek world survived Persian retaliation through unity, but that unity never existed. It was manufactured by someone who understood that war could only be delayed, not avoided. When he died, Greek warfare erupted again, almost immediately. That is the measure of his impact. Stability died with him. The fourth shadow general is tied to Alexander the Great, yet he is the most hidden figure of all. Alexander's genius is real, but heavily romanticized. What people don't know is that his scouts, his interpreters, his pathfinders, and his infiltration units were managed by a single man whose name appears only once in early texts and disappears afterward. This man specialized in terrain deception, knowing not just the geography, but how enemy commanders perceived geography. He created false maps that were deliberately stolen, making rival armies think deserts had water or mountains had passes. He sent disguised operatives ahead to spread rumors that Alexander's army was larger or smaller depending on what psychological reaction they needed. He bribed astrologers in enemy courts to declare unfavorable omens. He manipulated not just battlefields but belief systems. And it worked so thoroughly that entire regions surrendered purely out of myth-driven fear. Alexander received worship. His shadow general deserved it more. But the most powerful of all, the fifth shadow general, the one whose expertise shaped the modern world, is the Roman architect behind Caesar's rise. If Caesar was the blade, this man was the hand guiding it. He built a spider web of intelligence that connected traders, scouts, mercenaries, and informants across Gaul. He created a system in which no tribe could hide alliances, migrations, supply routes, or intentions. He placed double agents inside rival chieftain groups years before Caesar even arrived. He determined when Caesar should provoke conflict, when to delay, when to divide tribes into enemies, and when to make them distrust their own leadership. He even instructed Caesar to allow small victories to certain tribes so they would grow overconfident while secretly feeding Rome information. This general mastered emotional warfare. He understood humiliation, honor, fear, and ego better than any philosopher. He knew precisely which chiefs craved power, which feared betrayal, and which could be manipulated by promises of Roman favor. Caesar's campaigns looked brilliant on paper, but without this shadow general's preparation, Gaul would have been a nightmare. He removed obstacles before Caesar ever saw them. These 5 men weren't warriors, they were engineers of outcomes. They built networks, not legions. Their greatest weapons were not swords or shields, but whispers, forged documents, manipulated emotions, controlled rumors, and carefully seeded illusions. They created wars that never had to be fought, battles that were won before the armies assembled, and victories that appeared clean because the mess happened long before the public saw anything. Their tactics defined how militaries operated for centuries. They predated and inspired everything from Roman espionage to medieval informant systems to imperial intelligence agencies, and even modern warfare doctrines. What makes their story so compelling is that they operated without recognition, without statues, without recorded glory. They didn't crave fame, they craved results. They understood that real power is invisible, and the ones who operate in the shadows shape the world far more effectively than those illuminated by the fires of battle. To study them is to understand how empires truly functioned, not through brute force, but through unseen strategy. And when you peel back the layers of ancient history, you realize something extraordinary. The loudest wars were directed by the quietest men. Before we close this part, consider how many wars were prevented, manipulated, or redirected because of them. How many kingdoms rose or fell because of a whisper? How many armies marched into traps set months or years earlier? How many kings believed they ruled through strength, when in truth, they ruled through carefully constructed illusions? These shadow generals remind us that history isn't shaped by events. It's shaped by the people who planned those events long before they happened. And if this part opened your eyes to the hidden mechanics of ancient warfare, make sure you stay locked in for the upcoming content. You're supporting a channel that brings real history back from silence, and there's so much more to uncover. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And get ready, because the next episode will take you even deeper into the unseen forces that shaped our world.